Namaskar. Let me introduce myself before I deliver on the subject today. I'm sure a flyover circulated online reads my name and the subject I propose to deliver. My name is I. Narasimhan and I belong to a small hamlet in the state of Karnataka, the land of Bharat, called Melkote. This town for generations has been the center for learning Sanskrit and Indian literature. Representing this town, I feel privileged to present today a primer on Hinduism. The organizers have instructed me to introduce Hinduism, its historical significance, its philosophy, and the culture it promoted. In the given 60 minutes, I propose 40 to 45 minutes for detailing the above three topics very briefly. Each topic requires very fine detailing, not practical in a single session, but I shall try and introduce the subject today. Historically, we shall understand how the word Hinduism was introduced and its significance and some understanding of the merits, demerits of this word Hinduism. About the philosophy, we shall briefly understand the Vedic tenets like the Purusharthas and later connect to the temple culture of Hinduism. The last 15 minutes, I shall take some questions. However, in the subsequent lectures, as and when it is organized, we shall detail very fine detailing on these separate topics. My best wishes are with ICFA, the organizers for this ongoing web series. I know you have moved online very recently, and this seems to be working well for all of us in the current pandemic. Thank you, Sri Sheshadri Iyengar, for all the effort. When I say today, if we are talking about the topics listed here, the three topics, the history, philosophy, and culture, it almost conveys everything about Hinduism. I say this because the topics suggested here, it covers the entire gamut of the literature relating to or relevant to Hinduism. However, on these three verticals, I shall try and justify in the allotted time. So kindly appreciate all of you to take this as only a primer or an introduction to Hinduism. So to understand Hinduism in the context of its history, the philosophy and culture, we shall very briefly, we all know about it, still for the benefit of many, we shall very briefly define what these three mean to society today. We all know what history means. We call it the itihasa. History means a study of the past events in simple terms. So when it comes to history of Hinduism, there is a very big history. But today, we shall only understand how the name Hinduism was tagged to a specific or a select community. I say this because Hinduism, the word Hinduism itself, is relatively a new word given to this community. So we understand this history from this point of view today. About the philosophy. Philosophy in simple terms is seeking the fundamental truth about ourselves and the world we live. All about life here and life beyond. When I say life here and life beyond, it means that Hinduism clearly defines life as we see it here and a life that exists after death. Philosophy, we call it darshana. Next, the culture. What is culture? Culture could be defined as a manifestation of human intellect. Collectively, all forms are an integrated pattern of human intellect like attitude, moral, etc. Usually shared through art, through a language, a music, a dance, even the cuisine, etc. This is culture. Here, culture should not be confused with tradition. Tradition is more of a legacy of a belief or a behavioral pattern passed on from generations. So, culture, what is culture? Culture is a shared characteristic of a particular group or society, and the tradition could be the culture or the practice passed on through generations. Culture, we call it Samskriti. So we have understood briefly, in simple terms, what history, philosophy, and culture is all about. Having understood these three, we shall now briefly analyze this with relevant to Hinduism. When asked about our religion, we proudly declare we are a Hindu, which then means you practice Hinduism. Meaning your mind, body, and soul accepts the tenets and practices of the system. Earlier, I also said the word Hinduism is relatively new, which then would mean that we were referred to by some other name before. Let me cite an example to make this further clear. India is my country, and I am an Indian. But there is no single reference to this word India in any of the Indian scriptures. Let it be the Vedas, let it be the Itihasas, Puranas, Agama, wherever. No scripture reflects on the word India. The Vedas are the root. These scriptures called the Vedas is the root to the civilization here in India. But the Greek, they called us Indian because we were the civilization in South Asia and in a region east of Indus River. So this geographical area, they called it India. We accepted that name. Nothing wrong though. This is derived from Latin, but our scriptures don't reveal so. Our scriptures reveal that this geographical location east of Indus River as Bharatvarsh. Bharat. Further, it was the Persians who addressed the habitat of the land beyond the Sindhu River as Sindhus or Hindus. I presume, I'm not too sure. They say that in Persian, the old Persian language, the Sa and Ha were pronounced very similar. Might be the Persian now language has evolved. We can see this happen in every language, every society. Even in our system, the Vedic language has evolved into Sanskrit language and further evolved into Prakrit and many other regional Dravidian and also languages. So there is a possibility. The primitive language for us is the Vedic Sanskrit. Then came the Laukik Sanskrit, the Prakrit, and so on. Same way, the Persian language, the old and the new, there might be some evolution in the language itself. So the old language, Sindhus or Hindus, we were referred. We accepted those. So we accepted ourselves as Hindus and Indians. Why we accepted somebody else's name? This was all because the Europeans dominated our land for centuries. and it was very natural for all its citizens to adapt to their communities. Fair enough. But many a times, accepting a Latin, Greek, or any European name and adapting that particular word in our theology can be a disaster. I will cite some example. There are words called spirit and soul. These words are found in the Christian theology. Many authors of Indian theology, I mean the few authors, the European authors, started translating the Indian text to Roman English. When they did that, they borrowed some names from the Christian theology. Some of these are the spirit, the soul, and so on. And further, the legacy continued with many other Indian mentors and authors following the trend. I already said we were influenced by the Europeans because they dominated our country. See, according to Christian theology, from where it is borrowed and adapted by the Hindus, they also have three realities. They talk of body, soul, and spirit. That is mentioned in their texts. Hinduism in the Vedic scriptures also have three realities. They are called Achetana, Chetana, and Ishvara. Achetana is the insentient beings. Chetana is the sentient beings. Achetana means Prakriti, matter. Chetana is the soul, sentient being. Ishvara is the supreme personality of Godhead. These are the three realities the Vedic scriptures agree. They agree on body, soul, and spirit. Though both the theologists, the Christian and the Hindu theology, talk of three realities, and though in a way we can connect body to Achetana, soul to Chetana, but we can never connect spirit to Ishvara. The definition conceived is very different between spirit and Ishvara. So sometimes just borrowing a Latin, Greek, or Roman word is not wise, can lead to confusion. The wise thing to do is to read, understand, and learn the relevant theology in its original form and in its original language. I will share some example to prove this. I will read from the Christian theology, from their text. These are the words of Mary. She says, "My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior." Which means, spirit and soul are two different realities, and God is referred as the third reality. The meaning as documented in Christian theology is, Mary uses her soul to glorify God and then uses the spirit to rejoice in God. So if we analyze and we adapt these words as equivalent to Chetana, Achetana, Ishvara, it carries a meaning that is far from the tenets of Hindu scriptures. It's so wise to use the original scripture as it is in its original form and language. Adopting English words, all of us, especially the modern generation where we Google or Wiki the meanings of soul, spirit, etc., you don't get the correct context of Hindu text, and this leads to a lot of misinformation. Slowly, confusion setting down, and this will bring new theories and a new mindset within the people. So the purpose of any theology is to understand life, be it Christian or Indian or anything else. The life, that what I mean by life is life here and life beyond. Let me share an instance. I happened to encounter this. Once in a forum, I met a Hindu. He had just declared that he was well instructed to Indian philosophy. I asked him, "What is life?" He replied, "Life is what that happens to you when you are busy making other plans." Oh, what? Which literally would mean get busy living or get busy dying. How philosophical. Furthermore, to add fuel to the fire, There were many admirers to what he said, and he was cheered by many around there for his reply. This is our great misfortune. It is not that this gentleman has wrongly understood or has been wrongly mentored. It is because he has understood many concepts based on multiple theologies and incorporated them in his statement. So the idea of sharing this information, it is for us to encourage everybody and reflect on and tread with a lot of caution while in our pursuit to reading our text, and preferably, ideally, read it in its original form. It is said sometimes history repeats. Looks like the same thing is again happening with the yoga system today. Some similar influence and the legacy is now repeating here. We see meditation, asana and so on instructed by many different people in many different forms. Whether they conform to the Yoga Shastra, I'm not pretty sure. So this might be one more example for us to learn. So with this trend setting in, it may not be an exaggeration to say that one day we would all be misled to such an extent that we go to an Indian grocery store and we ask for a supplement to turmeric. Quite possible. It is not restricted to Indian and Indian languages. We have seen this happening to Roman English as well. The current slang by the millennial, it is a suicide to the traditional English language. Adapting to these new methodologies in their study and relating yourselves, we tend to lead a life where you declare that you don't need a religion to connect with spirituality. Life around a beach would do to connect spiritually. We are obviously influenced by Europeans and their language because they dominated our land for centuries. Not just the Romans, we are influenced by the Muslim rulers as well. Just like we got the name India and Hinduism, we got another name for our country called Hindustan. Somebody calls us Hindu, we said, yes, I am a Hindu. Somebody else called our country Hindustan, we said, yes, I belong to Hindustan. So what does all these mean? The message is very clear. It's very loud and clear. We lost our connect with our civilization. We lost our connect with our spoken language. So what happens? Understanding of our philosophy is disturbed. And so is the culture shock, as we all call it today. I just said civilization. The connect with the civilization is lost, is what I said. So if Hinduism is the new word given to us today, then what was our civilization called? We were called the Vedic civilization. There is no mention of Hinduism, Hindutva, or any such kind of a thing in any of our scriptures. What exactly is a civilization? Civilization is nothing but a coming together of people to form a settlement, who then achieve some social development, who are then the so-called civilized. They call themselves civilized after they develop a little bit socially. So when I mean Vedic civilization, it is believed that there is a civilization that existed in the Vedic age. What is the Vedic age? Vedas don't have a date of birth. Vedas are eternal. We call it Nitya. Nitya means eternal, always there. They were never born, they don't die. So this Vedic civilization should mean that it existed then and even now. Hinduism, if I use the same word, let me, for convenience, we use the de facto standard established by our friends, our neighbors from Europe. So if Hinduism be used, Hinduism, which is deep rooted in Vedas, the Vedic tenets, we can call it Anadi. Keeping this in mind, to counter a foreign word, Hinduism was not so very well accepted. Though it was initially accepted, later on, especially during the days of Tilak, Ranade and others, many prolific Indian mentors, to counter the word Hinduism, they started referring Hinduism as Sanatana Dharma, which Sanatana Dharma in Sanskrit generally means eternal path of righteousness. This was to replace the word Hinduism. This word Sanatana Dharma also has no reference in the Vedic scriptures. Again, be it in Itihasa, Purana, Agama, wherever, no reference. However, one thing is very clear. The current Hinduism is rooted to Vedic Dharma. I said Vedas are eternal. When I say eternal, it means that it was not man-made. What happens if, what is Vedas? Vedas is nothing but a constitution. If there is a man-made constitution, there will be many defects. It is told in the Shastras that there could be defects like Brahma, Vipralipsa, Pramada, Ashakti and so on. If anything is man-made, whatever is man-made have these defects. We will not get into the detailing of what these individually mean. We lack time. So some of the time we will get into the detailing of each one of these. When I say Vedas are eternal, how do I prove it? I can prove it. I don't have to prove it. Already the scriptures have proved it. We will work on it. We will seek some information on it. Like this, all these things can be discussed in length. And Hinduism not something that can be understood in 45 minutes. Vedas, I said, is a constitution. It is called a mirror image of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, according to the Vedic scriptures. God is omnipresent and He is also free from defects. So are the Vedas, His constitution, free of defects. Because both are eternal. Either is not man-made. So the fundamentals of this Vedic scripture is firm because they are not man-made and they are eternal. It is very firm, and tenets based on this or a theology or a science around Vedas is described Sanatan. The Vedic tenets describe three realities, I said, or the three tattvas we call, tattvatraya, three realities. Chetana, Achetana and Ishvara, I said. Chetana is the sentient being, the soul. Achetana is the matter, the prakriti, the insentient being. Ishvara is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These tattvas are called Sanatana Tattva because they are eternal. When I keep saying something is eternal and I keep declaring some statements, it's not self-made. I have not made this. This is according to the Hindu scriptures. We are now trying to understand how Hinduism came in. The word Hinduism came in, how it got converted to Sanatana Dharma, and what is that Sanatana Tattva of the Vedas, so that the philosophy is little bit understood. Then we will move into the culture. So the Sanatana Tattva are three in number: Chetana, Achetana and Ishvara. The Vedas also declare the path of Dharma, the path of righteousness. This is Sanatana Dharma. So, historically, the Vedic civilization, the Vedas itself, has many profound tenets for a society. And the theology or a religion it delivers is called the Vaidika Darshana. For example, one of the great philosophers, a social reformer, Acharya Ramanuja, he calls this darshana, he doesn't call it by the names like what we see, because Hinduism is all 100, 200, 300 years old. 1000 years ago, he called it Parama Vaidika Siddhanta. Or we can call it Vaidika Darshana. Darshana means philosophy. The Sanskrit word equivalent to English philosophy. Or we can call it Sanatana Darshana, eternal. Sanatana, I said, is always existing. Today it is called Hinduism. Today there is also a new perception. It existed, of course, for many hundred years it has been existing. The perception is that he who believes his own religion will regard that every other man as a lie. We hear a certain belief, whether philosophical or scientific, propounded by a founder, which then means either all are true at the bottom and all false at their surface. There seems to be variegated schemes of science and is now called spiritualism. We see that today in the social media, on our television sets, we have been seeing, let me not take names, let me not mention. This is called spiritualism. What is spirituality? Spirituality is the quality of being concerned with the soul more than the material world. Sometimes there is a confusion between philosophy, religion, spirituality, and so on, because we have borrowed many words which you can't relate to Indian texts. Religion is nothing but a specific set of practices or a belief. With the confusion set with borrowing these English words of philosophy, religion, spirituality, and so on, the generation today feels that it is important to be spiritual than being religious. The reason, again, is the influence of many other theologies. So we lost connect with our old established systems. We know very well that we have universities like Nalanda and others, which existed even before today's Oxford. But we simply can't revive Nalanda, or either we don't have a will, let me say. So what happens? We simply remain under a religious banner, a religion, and we are called Hindu. And I am a Hindu. This is where we stand today. Can we ever ponder? If we have to borrow Latin names, why don't we reason it out? Why can't some other region borrow Indian names and definitions? It's not happening. India has Sanskrit, which is diverse, ancient, and well-defined. And moreover, I just said Vedas are eternal. And Sanskrit language is derived from the Vedic language. From the Vedic language comes the Sanskrit, Prakrit, and many of the Dravidian languages. Everything comes from the Vedic language. We have wonderful languages, which is very diverse and ancient. Why can't the East and the West countries, East of India and West of India, borrow Sanskrit names? They don't. They are very clear about it. The West is always influencing and the East is always influenced. This is the thumb rule. This is not a thumb rule for many generations. It's been a thumb rule in the last 300, 400 years. We are left with no choice but to use the standard as it is. Even I am today talking with relevant to Hinduism. I have been using these words. That is because our education system doesn't understand the old civilization. Even today, the education system in India doesn't encourage study relating to Sanskrit, Prakrit, Tamil, and other regional languages. The influence is the same. It not only affects our theology, the understanding of the tenets, and so on. The influence goes up to influencing the food habits, the apparels we wear, and so on. It is always wise to know all the world languages and world religions. We should know. But it is not wise decision to adapt them universally. So this is something in simple terms I have explained to you. What is the history of Hinduism? What was it previously, the Vedic civilization, the Vedic Darshana? Then how is it recently, the Sanatana Dharma or Sanatana Darshana? This is some historical significance, how we got the name Hinduism, and we remain a Hindu today. We have to a little bit understand the tenets, the philosophy, because that is the second topic also given to me. Today we talk of globalization. In today's complex world, with so-called globalization, a question may be asked, and it's definitely worth a question. Why can't we all not come together, the whole world, the whole world community, build a consensus, and explore a new system which synergizes all the popular belief, traditions, practices, also not contradicting the modern science? In essence, what the question says, why don't we build a religious fabric around the scientific truth? This is a wonderful question. Nothing wrong in the question. But this question was long back asked by our seers and rishis. They were the people who were enlightened. And they answered it as well. They asked a counter question. What if there exists an ancient truth as old as the civilization itself, which is remarkably consistent with modern sciences and also consistent if logic be applied? A system which has put a code of ethics and a system of values, which evolved by philosophers as a philosophy. And we call it, and they call it, the Vedanta. So this question is answered. The solution is Vedanta. It is scientific. Whether you call it scientific, technical, whatever you want to call, you apply logic to it, it works. It is conforming to the Vedas? Yes, it is. This is the Vedanta, it's called. It's also called the Upanishads. And Vedanta is a very prominent school in Hinduism. The Vedanta Bhaga of the Vedas clearly give us the philosophical understanding of the tenets of the core tenets of Hinduism. We can't understand the complete philosophy today. Just briefly overview I can share. This Vedanta is just not consistent with science, but is also suited to be the spiritual basis for a more stable social organization that all good people desire. It helps build a regulated economy as well. It helps the society at large. Society doesn't mean the Hinduism is just not for the Hindus. It is, I said it is Sanatan. It is for everybody. When I mean is help the society, what is a society? Society is just a mere name given to a collection of individuals. These individuals who have definite form, thoughts, feelings and goals. This society evolved by exceptional men of vision who promoted this society. They were called the rishis. They were called the enlightened ones. What is enlightenment? The Vedanta, the Upanishad declares that enlightenment, I will not quote from the passages in Sanskrit. It will be more difficult to understand. I'm just giving you an overview today. So it is all going to be a simple, lucid English. What is enlightenment? Upanishad says, enlightenment is something that cannot come from extensive study. It can never come from a learned discussion. It can neither come through intellect. It comes when one's self-intensity yearns for realization, but not unless the mind has turned away from the evil. This is how the rishis were able to focus the mind and in the process purified the self. purity of life and mind, free of selfish desires, are the essentials of enlightenment. The enlightened rishis defined life for the society. And Hinduism adopts this system established by the rishis, which is again based on the Vedic literature, where all the logic and reasoning never fails. This literature delivers Vedic Dharma. What is Vedic Dharma? The duty. The purpose of Dharma is to protect the world through the duties which are moral. Every sentient and insentient being which is created in this planet, in the cosmos, has a specific duty to perform, without which creation is incomplete. For all these reasons, if Dharma may be called as a religion, Hindu Dharma or Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma may be very well called universal religion. A very popular saying, Dharmo Rakshita Rakshataha. Meaning, if you protect your religion or Dharma, your Dharma will protect you. The Dharma of human being, a dog or a snake may be different, but all are very well defined. There is an exception to human beings because of his intellect, called Buddhi. We have the capacity to discriminate between the good and the evil. And just because we have intellect, we are calling ourselves civilized. The philosophy of this Dharma, the Vedic Dharma, the Sanatana Dharma, or the Hindu Dharma, whatever you call it, is to perform duties as advised in the Vedas. Non-performance or performing otherwise will lead to accumulation of karma. This is the philosophy of Hinduism. There is a lot to discuss about karma, papa, punya, and other things. What is papa, punya? Karma is a composition of good and bad deeds done. Good deed leads to the accumulation of punya, and bad deeds accumulates papa. Punya can take you to the path of righteousness, which is the dharma, which further leads you to financial prosperity, the artha, and it fulfills all the desires, the kama. So, we call these as purusharthas, the goals of human existence. What are our goals? They are called the purusharthas in Sanskrit. The goals are dharma, artha, kama, moksha. 4 is listed in the Vedas. So, dharma is the path of righteousness. Artha is financial prosperity. Kama is fulfillment of desires. These and the moksha, the 4th one. Though all the 4 composite is called the purusharthas, the 4th one, the moksha, is also called the parama purushartha. All the 4 are very well defined in the Vedas. The 4th parama purushartha, moksha, is the reaching of eternal bliss, which happens only when both the papa and punya both are nullified. Even if you have excess punya, you can't go to moksha. Both have to be 0. The Vedas for all the varied men guides on all the 4 purusharthas. But it says something. It says the wise and the blessed are those who pursue the path of moksha, and others remain in samsara. What is samsara? I just repeatedly have been telling you, civilized society. Moksha, when I say moksha, again, influence. Do we call it liberation? When I call it liberation, yes, somewhat yes. In English, moksha can be called liberation in English. Yes, liberation from what? Liberation from samsara. Somewhat acceptable. Some people call it salvation. But the salvation, exact meaning in Christian theology is rescued from the evil. But in this context, salvation doesn't work well for moksha. So it is wise to retain moksha as it is. I call it moksha itself. So moksha meaning reaching the eternal bliss, the planet where the Supreme Lord resides in the eternal bliss. There is no sukha, there is no dukkha. It's a planet of bliss. It's not like this society. These are the 4 purusharthas defined in Hinduism. They are called the goals. To achieve these purusharthas, there needs to be a text which very well defines, guides and mentors. And that is the infallible Vedas. Why Vedas all the time? So again, it is told that, again the Vedic texts, the Hinduism preaches that Vedas are Swata Pramana. What is Swata Pramana? It's a beautiful subject to discuss. It requires at least around 10 words to discuss and close this topic. Veda Swata Pramanya Nyayam, it's called. Which means Swata Pramana. Swata Pramana means Vedas don't require another credible text or a work to establish its credibility. Vedas are credible by itself. This has been very well established using the Nyaya Shastra. Nyaya Shastra is the logic. There is something called the Navina Nyaya and the ancient logic and the new Nyaya Shastra. Shastra has one of the Shastras to study in Hinduism, which is very important for the study of philosophy or to understand the theology, is Nyaya Shastra. Using this Nyaya Shastra, we can very well establish Swata Pramanyam for Vedas, which means they are pramana. Pramana means authentic by itself. They are credible by itself. They don't require an extra pramana, some other text to watch for it. Usually, to know anything in this world, it is said that there are 3 valid means. Although many other means are mentioned by our rishis, our own Hindu scriptures, totally they can be accommodated in the primary, most important 3 means of valid knowledge. They are called the pratyaksha, which is direct perception. What I see here, what I see, I am in front of my mobile, yes. So I see the mobile, that is pratyaksha. Anumana, which is an inference. I infer, seeing that there is fire. So I see smoke in the top of the hill, so I presume that there is fire there. That is Anumana. The third is the verbal testimony, the Shabda it is called in Sanskrit. Pratyaksha, Anumana and Shabda are the 3 valid means of knowledge. Certain things we can see by our naked eye, like I can see, if I have to establish that I have a mobile, I know it is in front of me. I need a book, I can always see something. I can see this individual, I can see many more things. The things like moksha, understanding of the planets above, beyond what beyond the earth, and to understand how they look like, it's still being explored scientifically, but it's already acknowledged and documented in the Vedic literature. It's told that there are millions of planets and these people are still counting 1 and 2, the modern science. So again, about relating to moksha, what is moksha? Is there a planet which is full of bliss at all? Where is it? Where is the location? How do I go there? What is the journey there? How do I go? Everything, the means, everything is defined in the Vedic texts. So certain things which can't be understood by pratyaksha or anumana is only understood. Things like moksha and the reality, the total reality, can be understood only through Shabda. The Shabda means the eternal, the credible Vedas. These Vedas help you and mentor through life experiences here and also with many things still unknown to man. They very clearly define the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the means to attain Him, and the way the Supreme Planet of Bliss looks. And finally, when we reach there, we enjoy the status which the Supreme Personality enjoys. There is no difference between the qualities bestowed to a soul here once he reaches the planet of bliss. Why He gives everything? Once you go there, He gives whatever He has to you. So why is that? That is because of His deepest affection. The super soul, if you are going to call, I tend to be influenced by the Roman as well. So when you call the soul is a Jivatma. Super soul is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you call so, the super soul is always interested. Super soul, the soul is owned by the super soul. The soul belongs to the super soul. So always the super soul is interested in getting the soul back to his planet. So he does some krishi, we call it. Krishi means he works hard to get him back to his planet. That is through he gives the Shastras. He gives the Vedas. He gives the journey. He gives the means. Everything he declares. So, to relate this, to understand this, why God is so affectionate to the soul, and why he gives almost everything that he owns to this soul who is just come into this planet. So there's a small story that is narrated in the Upanishads itself. Let us briefly understand what that story is. A mother has 3 children. 2 of her children live with her and the third far away from her. So when I say far away, somewhere very far away. Like today's context, if you see, many people migrate to the European countries or the US, Australia and so on. So one of the son has migrated very far from the mother. The other 2 children of hers are with her. So what happens? There is a festival of the most important Indian festival, Deepavali. That day, the trend is always, Deepavali is a very important festival of the Hindus. There is a tradition to purify yourself, wear nice new clothing, distribute sweets and burst crackers and celebrate. This mother sitting here, celebrating with her 2 children, is hardly concerned about these 2 children of hers. She is more anxious to hear from her child who is far away from her, to know if he or she celebrated Deepavali at all. This is how affection of a mother works in this samsara, the civilized society. If this is an affection of a mother in samsara, what is the status of the mother of all, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always worried about the welfare of the souls which stay far away from his planet of bliss in the samsara? He is not at all bothered about his subjects who are already staying in this planet. He is more bothered about us who stay far away from him. This is how the Hindu theology, tradition, values are built firm in the tenets as exposed in the Vedas. So Hinduism stands firm in the Vedic tradition. This is what we have to understand. So we very briefly have understood what Hinduism is, what Sanatana Dharma is, and what is our Vedic Dharma, or what is the Parama Vaidika Siddhanta, which is the very old name given to the today's trendy Hinduism. We have understood that with Vedas we have a very firm theology. Hinduism has a very firm theology to offer to the society. We have also read some few lines from history as to how we got tagged as Hindus and Hinduism. If this is how we Hindus have come so far, then the third question, obviously, as the organizers have very clearly framed the topic, where is our Hindu culture heading to? Our culture is also deep rooted in the Vedas. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, as declared in the Vedas, is omnipresent, and the Vedic scriptures, the Agamas and other literature declare that he is seen in 5 forms. God can be perceived in 5 forms. They are called the Para, Vyuha, Vibhava, Antaryami and Archa. Means, Para means the God as realized as he sits in his planet of bliss, which we can't see. Vyuha, he comes a little lower to the lower planets, he sleeps in the Milky Ocean. He is accessible to the people who have enlightened, the rishis. That also we can't see. Vibhava, he came as Rama, Krishna and other avatars to this planet, into the samsara. We are not in that age, we can't see. Antaryami, he sits quite within the soul inside and monitors the soul and guides everybody. So I can't see that either. I am not an yogi either. So the best way to see him is in the Archa, the 5th form. The Archa form is nothing but as an idol in the temple. So Archa is the form where we see Lord in the temples. But when I say temples, people in Hindu culture today, it's totally misunderstood. the temples are just rigid places of worship. This understanding is misleading, and for this reason, many move away from temples, and they borrow practices from West, saying that they read some phrases like "work is worship" and "my workplace is my temple." Some say "my good deeds is my temple," and so on, just escaping a visit to the temple by calling it a place of worship with many rigid traditions and practices, and they call it non-scientific. The Vedic literature, called the Agamas, described in totality the temple construction, benefits, maintenance, activities, etc. It is the biggest misfortune of modern Bharat, which lost its connect with our temples. And who should be given credit here? The credit fully gives to the tireless effort of our invaders, who looted the temples. And ask me why these people first attacked temples? Because the temples were the places of knowledge. That is where the wisdom resides. That is where the intellect resides. That is where the art resides. That is where the wealth, the kings stored wealth there. So the invaders realized that breaking this power center will break the wise Bharat. And that was our misfortune. All invaders usually used to show to the society their might, power and prestige by invading only Hindu temples. So they systematically, periodically destroyed this temple culture, which had many things to give to the society. It was just not a place of worship, it had more. Many rulers, many kings in their kingdom built temples. Why did they build temples at all? To show their power and resources they had in their kingdom. The temple was just not a place of only art, tradition and so on. It had a lot of skills. It had many artisans, it had many sculptors, it had many engineering. The temple had many things, all was there. The complete culture was within the temple. The culture, we call it Samskriti. Samskriti means Kri Dhatu, to do, which is to do. Some means to perfection, meaning all exhibits, be it art, science, engineering, traditions, were exhibited only in the temple. And it also happens to be the place of divine. So the Lord here dwells in the Archa form, we call it. So it is a place of worship for us. We don't have a specific day for prayers. We pray every day. So the whole town might be from a kids playing in the temple premises to projecting all the art forms was exhibited to perfection only in a temple. We can call it a power center, we can call it a demo center for all the rulers to exhibit their might and prosperity of their kingdom. Whether be it religious, scientific or economic, it remained a seat of learning, posturing, worship, promotion center and so on. The entirety of culture and tradition was centered around the temple. Even the kingdom treasury, I told, was safeguarded in the temple. So that was the first thing our people, our invaders, first dismantled and destroyed the temples. So our culture, I spoke about culture shock earlier, the culture, the philosophy, the tradition of Hinduism is somewhat shaken. But we are still firm, even still firm. Please understand, we are not lost. Hinduism still stands firm, but somehow has lost the original flavor. And it is our responsibility to reconstruct the values as it is and deliver a society free from misdeeds. This remains the social responsibility of all Hindus. And this country, Bharat, for long has been looked with high esteem for both wealth and wisdom. And I think we are heading in that direction even today. So the purpose, I very well congratulate the organizers for having chosen these three titles very well. Yes. And I think I am not too sure whether I have justified in the allotted time. So, but the purpose of today's session was just to remember the past from some lines from the history to understand where we as a Hindu stand and seek some here and there some teachings from the philosophy. And let us now ponder over how we re-establish our culture. Culture, nothing is wrong with the culture, but it is dying. So we have to rekindle it. So how can all this happen? Only when this happens, our nation, Bharat, will be more vibrant. So I think I've tried enough to justify in the allotted time. Thank you all. I think I will come back with one more login session if you have any questions. I'll come back in a minute. I'll just log off and come back with the questions. So you can just patiently wait. Thank you all for your patient listening. Jai Bharat.